Making Fort Collins great. That's a great question. I think my answer would be that the citizens of Fort Collins is what makes Fort Collins great, and why I have such great confidence as to how our future is going to be. We've got a great educational system here in our community, from the school district to the junior college to the university, which is going to be expanding to more than 35,000 students in the near future. And I think that as I reflect upon it, it's the citizens of Fort Collins that make Fort Collins great. You were asking how Fort Collins was different when I was mayor, and I think that my response to that would be the types of new industries that were coming into Fort Collins at that time. The Hewlett-Packard folks had arrived in the mid-70s, and that was a kickoff to all of the various electronics industries that have come to Fort Collins. And we also were about to invent bringing breweries to Fort Collins, and now today we count probably 10 or 11 breweries that are in Fort Collins, and so things changed dramatically from when I was mayor. I think I remember when I first came here, there were not more than 60,000 citizens of Fort Collins, and the growth has been constant. And when I was on city council, we always had quite a few conversations on how we would be able to, not that I was an advocate of it, but how we would be able to limit growth. I never wanted to spend my time worrying about how we were going to limit growth. It's, to me, just a natural event, and I know that I've been in enough sessions that we're now trying to take a look at how growth is going to impact the entire state of Colorado in the next 50 years. And one of my big thoughts there is that we as a community and we as a state are going to need to find new water resources in order to make that happen. I think that being able to be part of the team that brought Anheuser-Busch to town was easily the proudest moment I had. We, at that time, John Arnold was our city manager, and we spent many days and nights discussing the pros and cons of bringing Anheuser-Busch to town. And of course, Anheuser-Busch was looking at potentially locating both in Greeley and down in Pueblo before they came to Fort Collins. And in my interactions with the then mayor of Greeley, Mr. Hall, we had many a conversation as to the various strengths and weaknesses. And I really think that one of the nice things about Anheuser-Busch, I being a CPA, we changed the tax balance of the city of Fort Collins. Anheuser-Busch created just such with a more than $300 million investment in their brewery, it really changed our ability to rely on property taxes, and we were, prior to that, just totally dominant on sales tax collections. And when I listen to council meetings now, and I hear that we have a reliance of about 60% on sales tax, I think back saying, gee, I wonder how that magically happened. And we worked very hard in order to bring the Anheuser-Busch to town. We also, at that same time, had a huge construction project out north of town called Rawhide, which was part of the Platte River Power Authority, and it was the largest construction project that went on in Colorado in the early 80s, and I think it brought continuing ability for Platte River to create and manufacture electrical power, and I look back at that, and that all happened. It ended in 1984, and the ability for the Rawhide power plant to be online has been one of the most advantageous things that has happened to our community in the last 30 or 35 years. The challenges that I faced during my tenure as mayor and as part of the council, at the time we were inviting Anheuser-Busch to come to town, and we then found that we were going to have a citizen election in order to ratify whether we could take that step to allow Anheuser-Busch to come to town. There were lots of challenges associated with Anheuser-Busch. Members of the community were very vocal that Anheuser-Busch was a union company and it would cause Fort Collins to become a union town, and we struggled with that. And one of our earlier former mayors, Nancy Gray, put together the program to allow us to have a public vote. And my recollection of that vote was that there were 12,000 Fort Collins residents that voted yes and 10,000 residents that voted no, and we were able to get that behind us, and we were able then to roll up our sleeves and work with the Anheuser-Busch people and realistically making the brewery happen in Fort Collins. My fondest memory, and one that many people probably won't even remember or talk about, was back in 83, 84, Fort Collins passed a non-smoking ordinance. And I think that it's not quite the non-smoking ordinance that we have in our community today, but my fondest memory of what we accomplished during my tenure as mayor or on council was starting off the non-smoking ordinance. And I can remember I was on the Colorado Municipal League executive board, and I remember touring the state, talking to other communities, how we were able to get that accomplished. And I think Fort Collins not only took a leadership position in the state, but we took a leadership position in the United States, and being able to positively impact our community by limiting the use of tobacco products. It took a lot of steps, but what we did in 83 or 84, I think just really opened the door to non-smoking. And I sit in my office today and just watch people who are new to the community, and they walk through my front door and they start looking for a cigarette or something like that. And it's just now second nature in Fort Collins that none of that takes place. And initially there was just a ban on indoor smoking. Then I think we moved it up to a ban of 20 feet in terms of entryway smoking, and I think that that's now been moved up to even greater distances. And I really think that history will say John Knezovich, the greatest accomplishment, even though you've talked about Anheuser-Busch, I think the greatest accomplishment we had as a collective city council was to start out this trend to ban public smoking, and I think it has had an impact in America. In terms of impact, there are three things that I would talk about during my tenure as having long-term impact for our community. I think the creation of the Anheuser-Busch Brewery project had just lots and lots of challenges, given that at the time the brewery was way out northwest or northeast of town, and we hadn't even annexed out there, and we had to annex down the railroad tracks in order to get the brewery to be able to come into our city. So I think that Anheuser-Busch is number one. I think that, as I've said, I think the non-smoking ordinance, passage of that has been really a very great thing, simply because it's had such a national and state impact. And the third thing that I'm very proud of is that while I was on the Platte River Power Authority board, we were able to put together a plan to build Rawhide, which was at the time just the biggest construction project that was going on in the state of Colorado. In giving advice to the future leaders of Fort Collins, I think that my message to them is we need to deal with water for both our community and all of the state of Colorado. We need to create an additional 600,000 acre-feet of water in order for the planned population 40 and 50 years out in order for them to be able to live in Colorado. I came from the state of Illinois, and on average back in Illinois we would get 40 inches of rain a year, and I just thought that that was a natural occurrence around the United States. And to have come to Fort Collins in the late 60s and early 70s and realize that rain just didn't naturally happen has always caused me to believe that we need to do more for creating more water storage projects. There was a Fort Collins mayor in the late in the late 50s. His name was Harvey Johnson, and Harvey, I think he was mayor in 57. He came to Fort Collins on a covered wagon, and he was one of the fathers of creating the various water districts and bringing trans-mountain diversion water into Fort Collins. And always remember talking with Harvey Johnson about making sure that we always have adequate water supplies for the citizens of Fort Collins and all of northern Colorado. Water is an issue that we need, because of my background of having grown up in an area where water was just a natural occurrence, and people continue to move in from places like Illinois and Iowa where water is natural. I think that one of the things that we always have to continue to do is to educate the citizens of Fort Collins on the importance of the fact that water just doesn't naturally occur here, that we have to plan and build for it. Well, one of the issues that I haven't talked about is when I was on council, we were very fortunate to have a fellow by the name of John Arnold as our city manager. I remember in '82 or '83, John Arnold introduced electronic mail to members of the Fort Collins City Council. And when I talk about electronic mail and email, everybody just thinks it's you just turn on your computer and it happens. At the time, we had leaders from Hewlett-Packard helping the city implement a very, very, very original version of electronic mail, and I think that that opened the eyes of Fort Collins City Council members that the technology of the future is what we as a city council needed to invest in. And I don't know what the technologies of the future for 25 years from now are going to be, but I feel that we as a city have always been leaders in advancing technology, and I hope that Fort Collins continues to strive to bring changes that none of us today can even imagine. As we listen to Dr. Frank at CSU talk to us about the future funding of Colorado State University, and 10 years from now, he continues to say that we will have lost all of our state funding for Colorado State University, and it's going to be quite a challenge for everybody to figure out how both Colorado State and Fort Collins will survive with just the fact that there will not be government money put into running the university, and I think that's going to be a big challenge for the future for our community.